Well, hey there, Alga Talk listeners. It's me, Jack, and we're back with another episode, part 2 of the Ellen Hutchins interview with Madeline Hutchins and Francis Gallagher. And of course, we're going to be exploring the reasons why the Ellen Hutchins Festival exists, why it's important to honor this great woman, and of course, we're going to explore the relationship she has with other people that are important within phycology. She, of course, had many correspondence with many different phycologists, early phycologists. For one is Dawson Turner. And we're going to explore the parallels between Turner and Hutchins. And without further ado, here's my interview with Madeline Hutchins and Francis Gallagher at the Ellen Hutchins Festival this past summer. So you were talking about how Ellen Hutchins, her family, put a big emphasis that both the girls and the boys should be taught the same level. Dawson Turner also does that with his daughters to teach them how to do the samples on glass.
Well, yes, he gave them an incredibly broad education. I think they were taught Latin, which Ellen wasn't. Yes, he was absolutely passionate about educating his girls. To a certain extent, from very sad circumstances there, because his first 3 sons died as young children, one in a fire in the nursery. So it was a long time before he had a boy to educate, which may have been why his girls got quite a good shot at it. But yes, but he also uses them as labour, if you like. They produced drawings and etchings for him. They catalogued everything, indexed it for him. They prepared the books before they were bound. They must have had a wonderful time. There's little accounts of them being up at 6 a.m. and no minutes to be wasted.
Absolutely.
He named one of his daughters after Ellen. After Ellen had been very ill, she very nearly died. She'd just written to him to say, "I've survived, you haven't lost your friend." He then writes, quite soon after, writes back to say that his wife has been delivered of another daughter. And the nurse has said that she's going to be the flower of the family. And he has decided to name the daughter after Ellen. So the girl is called Ellen. And he says that I'd love you to be her godmother because I know no other female in the world that I would rather a child of mine emulated.
Wow, strong words.
That girl, Ellen, that daughter, Ellen Turner, she gets into botany when she's older and she teaches her various nephews and nieces botany as well. And she is actually the one that she marries a bishop and she lives to her 80s. And she's the one that donates all the volumes of letters, the ones that Ellen has written to Dawson Turner that have been very carefully catalogued and bound, helped binding them by his daughters. And they're in the Wren Library of Trinity College, Cambridge. And they're in very good company. They're with the original manuscripts of Winnie the Pooh and Newton's work.
Wow.
So you couldn't be more interesting.
It's in a proper place.
Yeah, and her letters are beside ones from Amelia Griffiths and from people like James Edward Smith. She's in there with the botany royalty of the time. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I find it the interesting parallel between the Turner family and Hutchins family that it wasn't normal to actually teach daughters science or give them a different set of skills. That they were able to find each other in life is really just a miracle, almost like it was destined to be.
Yes, yeah. I love the what ifs. That's the bit I like. What if had managed to travel to Dawson Turner's place at Yarmouth?
She had managed to live another 5 years.
Yes. He wanted her to co-author a book on the lichens, and she also one other botanist that he was mentoring from a distance. Well, not from a distance. He was mentoring obviously Ellen from a distance. He was also mentoring William Jackson Hooker, who's exactly the same age as Ellen, and he ends up marrying Dawson Turner's eldest daughter, Maria, and he's knighted for his services to botany while he's professor of botany in Glasgow, and then he becomes first director of Kew Gardens, and his son it becomes the second director of Kew Gardens. So I mean, what if he and Ellen had met?
Absolutely.
That's fascinating.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
If she'd just been able to get to Dublin, she was too tied to home. She says she's as tied to home as a mother with 10 children.
And she didn't know of that.
And that's from looking after her elderly mother and a disabled brother. So she never even got to Dublin. Do you know, we don't even think she managed to visit the Botanic Garden in Cork. When she could get someone to cover for her, she'd head up to the mountains. That was her. Seaweeds were her first botanic love. And then to a large extent, I think the liverworts, actually, which was a huge family at the time, much bigger than it is now.
But one of the reasons you're saying that she may have stayed in Bantry Bay was because of her sick mother and her disabled brother. I mean, it kind of shows to her character that she is getting this kind of, fame and notoriety, and she's still so dedicated to taking care of her family. I mean, there's something very special to Ellen that is even beyond the side of botany. There's these stories of her life that show you real character at that time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's lovely because that sort of thing transcends the periods, doesn't it? While we have to remember she didn't have waterproofs, her transport would have at most have been a horse. Those things are so different. When it comes to putting family first or being respectful of an elderly parent and caring for them, and then, thank goodness, on the botanical side, she is treating the shoreline as we would now, where you don't take it all off because you want to be able to, sell the lovely coloured bits to someone, which happened in the Victorian period. She predates that, and it is her personal character.
Yes.
And she's so generous as well. There's lots of comments where she's given her last specimen of something really rather rare. So she's got to wait for the right weather, get to the right rock, find it again, and preserve it all over again. And yet she's been willing to post off her last one.
Wow, really? She was amazing. I'm curious, Ellen, was she someone that was talked about in your family? Like, when did you first learn of this, amazing person was in your family tree?
Yes, I mean, I suppose I can't remember when I first heard of her because the name was always around, that my family knew clearly that they had a relative. She obviously, with no children, she has no descendants. But I was quite clear that I'd had an aunt, in fact, she's my great-great-grand-aunt in the Irish scheme and great-great-great-aunt in the English scheme. But when you only hear from family that you've got an important relative, it's and you're a youngster, it's very easy to think, oh, well, it's just someone overdoing it. And it wasn't until I heard from someone from the botanical community that actually Ellen was very special, that I realised quite the significance that she still holds within the specialist areas.
You've done a tremendous amount, I think, as well, to raise her profile in Ireland and to talk about her in public and bring her back into recognition.
Yeah, I think since the festival. I mean, before that, there was another two significant stepping stones before we got to where I felt it feels like a bit like a relay race, and I've got the baton at the moment.
Yeah,
before
you're doing very good.
The baton and ran. And along with my two colleagues here, one of whom from the botanical side, Claire Herdman, and the other from the historical side, Angela O'Donovan. And it needs the three of us. We between us share the baton at the moment, to be fair. But before that, there was a Professor Michael Mitchell from NUI in Galway. He wrote an absolutely wonderful, it's an occasional paper that was published by Glasnevin. And it's the letters between Ellen and Dawson Turner with a very good introductory essay and incredibly scholarly notes. And that came out in 1999. It's been read by people almost like a Jane Austen novel, just by reading the contents of the letters for the human relationship that develops between them. And it's been read by botanists. As well as her work in the cryptograms, she was asked by Dawson Turner to produce a list of all the plants in the neighbourhood, because he could tell from the comments she was making in the letters that it was very botanically rich. And she produced a list of about 1,100 plants, and really is the first flora of this area. But it was never published. It was meant to be published by the Linnaean Society, of which Dawson Turner was a member. But for some reason, we don't know why, he never passed it to them for publication. So actually that 1999 occasional paper from Glasnevin by Mitchell was the first time her list was published.
Wow.
So that was an incredibly significant stepping stone. That brought her to the attention. There'd been a bit before. There'd been some essays. There'd been an exhibition in Ulster calling her the young lady of the lichen. So there'd been bits and bobs. But then yes, we built the festival on the back of. We couldn't have done it without that Mitchell. paper.
This was as part of Heritage Week to be
so Heritage Week in August 2015. We also put a plaque on the church. She's buried in an unmarked grave, which wasn't that unusual in that period. If the family was in a bit of an upheaval, and the whole thing about elaborate stones comes a bit later in the 19th century, not at her period. So I don't think it's any of huge significance that her grave is unmarked. So is her mother's, so is her brother's. It's no big shakes. But it felt a bit odd. I mean, obviously her main legacy is the specimens that are still looked at and the help that she gave in increasing the understanding of seaweeds in particular.
Absolutely. So, talking about Ellen, and that I'm just curious: is the Irish public learning, as they're learning more about Ellen, are they being receptive?
Yeah, no, definitely, absolutely, definitely. I mean, they all feel like we two do, that it's a wonderful story. And they're surprised. I mean, we had an Irish Times journalist just very recently saying, "Why haven't I heard of her before?"
Yeah, absolutely.
It's lovely to get that. It's lovely to get that sort of response. So it's a story worth telling, and the story itself is a way into the perhaps less recognised areas of botany.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I think the more people will learn about seaweed or Ellen, I think they'll learn that both seaweed and algae and Ellen, a lot of people don't talk about them, they don't know about it, but once they start learning about it, it changes their minds. They're like, wow, algae's really this, it could do that. It's, we can use it this way, and it's very interesting to people once they start learning about it. And I feel that almost Ellen's story is almost the same way that people are discovering algae now in the modern times. Discovering her could be a step forward in that direction.
Yes. And I mean, I think the two aspects that she was particularly keen on, I think, that again span the periods, is the beauty of the stuff. She talks about exquisite little beauties and little treasures and all the rest, and beautiful descriptions of them. And then the other thing is the world you see through the magnifying glass or the hand lens. We're trying to make sure that everyone who comes on our events gets to look through a hand lens. Most of them, adults and children, haven't before or can't remember when they last did. And they nearly all say, oh, wow. You show them the end of a tiny little bit of seaweed, something that the human eye can't see, that they're seeing through the lens. There's you're literally opening up their eyes to a whole new world.
Absolutely.
That is just the beauty of the thing, and the science, how they work. It's interesting because I think in her period they were still trying to work them out. It's the puzzles of the science. She occasionally says, there's a comment about how the country people eat the tops of one of the seaweeds, and then she talks about another plant, how they manage to poison fish with it but still eat the fish. It's a lovely one, that.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting that she only lived, such a young life, but that even to this day she's still influencing all these people around her. That she's part of the story of seaweeds is really remarkable. Yes,
and we see that and particularly I think the fact that she did everything so young.
Yes, her fine eye and her.
That encourages young people. They think, okay, I don't have to get to the stage, where I have the silver hair and the wisdom. I could actually do it before I'm 30. Yeah, no, I think that's it's a great encouragement.
Yeah, she's a major inspiration, absolutely. I wanted to just ask you if there's anywhere that people would like to find out more about Ellen Hutchins. Where could they do that?
There's a website, which is ellenhutchins.com.
And you wrote a book, if I'm not mistaken, about...
Sure, there's also the book, yes, the old tech. There's also a lovely little book, which has just come out. We launched it in July here in Bantry. And yeah, it tells her story, and it does it in words and pictures. Because she thought images, the visuals were so important, we've made a real effort, and it's a lovely looking little thing. And it's got some of her specimens in it, it's got some of her drawings in it, we've got permission from Q to use those, it's got some of her letters, showing the cross-hatching as well, where she writes in both directions. She writes conventionally down the page, turns it sideways and writes over it again. There's a little example of that. There's some archive material.
And if somebody wanted to purchase this book, they could find it on the website?
They could, yes. Yes, under the store button on the website. And we can post it to them just about anywhere.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Madeline and Francis. That was a fantastic conversation.
Thank you. And thanks for bearing with us on the technical challenges.
No, fantastic. And enjoy Bantry Bay and enjoy all the rest of the festival. I'm very excited to to see more pictures that you guys are posting on Facebook.
There are technical challenges there too, but there are more that are going up soon.
Well, hopefully there'll be more festivals and we'll be able to do this more often.
Thanks, Jack.
Wow. So that was the interview with Madeline Hutchins and Francis Gallagher about this great phycologist named Ellen Hutchins. Now, of course, Ellen Hutchins is not the first early pioneer of phycology. There are many others. There are as much the fathers, and then there are the mothers of phycology. And I'm going to put out an APB out for all the female phycologists out there. If you want to talk about them and you want information put out there, for instance, we have an APB out for Mary E. Barber, Suzanne Faraday, Amelia Griffith, Margaret Gaddy, Anne Ball. All these women were very important in the early parts of phycology. And all of them started with minus Amelia Griffith, they all started with Ellen Hutchins. All that Ellen put together and how she was able to do research is almost parallel to many of these other women around the world, some in South Africa, some in Australia, that were sending species and samples to Dawson Turner, to W.H. Harvey, to the Agards in Sweden. All of these species were coming from these very important women that went out there and foraged. And I cannot be more respectful that I learn about people that actually go out and forage in nature to find different ingredients that they use in their own personal recipes. I've talked to many different people, and it's a very amazing concept to just be able to just go out there and you kind of know what you're looking for and you find it and you use it. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody that's interested in the most wanted of phycology. So once again, like we say, if you keep listening, we'll keep Alga talking.